folks, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that are read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. One of his advocacy is being a screenwriter and film producer, no other than Mr. Brandon Ransbottom.
Hello, glad to be with
Welcome,
you.
welcome, Mr. Brandon. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I must?
Of course, I'm a screenwriter located in Florida and working on our first feature film that we produced with our local crew and cast. In addition to work that I've done in the industry previously, this is kind of our first foray into my team tackling a feature length film.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Brandon. Hoping for
Good.
more. Yes, hoping for more and more films to come. So today, let's talk about writing a feature film. Tell us, beyond a catchy long line, what is a central, compelling question your film explores?
I think the central theme of the movie has to do with identity, both with the main character and also with honestly with the state of Florida. There's a juxtaposition between the ancient and the modern. In Florida we have swamps, alligators, these things that are very very ancient and old, and then we have Disney World, we have Miami, neon lights. There's always this clash of what was previously there and what is there's a lot of tourists obviously in Florida, and we really wanted to explore that idea and have a character and an antagonist that kind of represent these different uh, messages and ideals.
Interesting, Mr. Brandon. How do you design the crucible for a protagonist? The situation that force them to make impossible choices and fundamentally change.
Sure. With this film, we knew that we had a very limited budget. This was, like I said, this was our team trying to tackle something that we've done previously for other clients and in other situations, and we knew that the story had to begin, right away. Within the first 2 minutes, we needed to capture the audience, and so our hero, our protagonist, Marshall Brooker, is on for him, it's just another job. He is a a very Indiana Jones esque character, except that he's not working for a museum or a school. He's working for profit, for money. He's a relic hunter. He takes things and gives them to uh, essentially whoever's hired him or the highest bidder. In this particular case, at the beginning of the film, he discovers something that seems to have supernatural qualities to it. And instead of turning it over, he holds it hostage. And of course, that leads to a whole litany of problems for him.
Mr. Brandon, the best villains believe they are the hero of their own story. What is your antagonist core, relatable belief or desire that just justifies their action in their mind?
Sure. So in our film, the antagonist is a character named Roman, and he definitely sees himself. I don't know if he sees himself as a hero per se, mostly just because, but he definitely sees himself as the main character. I can tell you that because he comes from a rough background and he's had a hard life, and he is, he has sent Marshall Brooker on this task, and when somebody, contradicts him or stands in his way, he immediately sees that person as an obstacle to be destroyed, not someone to be bargained with. He doesn't do deals, and when that is Marshall Brooker's kind of ultimatum to him, Roman does not take kindly to that, and he kind of sets us into the climax of the film by uh, putting our hero in a situation that, as you stated, previously, doesn't seem like it's something he can get out of.
Mr. Brandon, if plot is what happens, the story is why it matters. What is the core emotional journey you want the audience to experience from opening scene to closing credits?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the goals with making this particular film was we really wanted to tap into maybe not even classical filmmaking, that maybe is too grand of a statement, but we really wanted to create kind of a throwback to the 80s and 90s, where there are these films that certainly you can bring and inject a lot of meaning and substance to. But on another hand, sometimes you know, a things are what they are on their face, and there isn't maybe a lot of deep subtext. And we really wanted to do an experiment to see, could we make a throwback type film, a genre film that wasn't, they're steeped in, a lot of allegory. Let the audience bring their interpretation. And so that was really the exercise of the film, was to not, labor the film with a lot of meaning that we were injecting. We really wanted to create scenarios and plotting that would allow the viewer to, see themselves in the character. Marshall Brooker is very much an avatar for the audience.
Mr. Brandon, while structure is crucial, where do you find the freedom for creativity to surprise within it?
Sure. As if you're working on a screenplay, especially a screenplay as opposed to other forms of writing, there's certainly the expectation that you will follow the traditional three-act structure. What's interesting, though, is when you look at a lot of films that are successful, they don't necessarily follow that in maybe the way that you'd read it in a screenwriting book, so to speak. There there's a lot of ways that you can adapt that structure by having mini arcs, by having in our film, for example, there are some crucial characters that are introduced in the third act, and we call them temperature characters. They change the temperature of the room, they change the temperature of the movie. In a way that maybe that's a slightly different from a book. A screenplay, at least in my mind, you're taking someone on a very finite and timed journey. Like a book you could read for, I mean, you could read a book forever, right? You could just languish over the words and go back to them and reread sentences. A film kind of plays out in real time, and so it's kind of like a roller coaster in that way, or a ride of some kind. And so I think that's where the freedom comes, is releasing yourself from the strictures of needing everything to be precise, maybe in the way that it would be in a novel. In a film, there's something about just the way that it feels in the moment. Like, there's a shot maybe that you linger on, you don't really know why you're lingering on it. Maybe there's not, a story reason, but it just feels right.
What is the moment in your script where the protagonist makes an active it is and the choices that launches them to the second act, and why is it more powerful than being passively pushed?
Sure, and that is something that we really dealt with this particular movie. Honestly, because of budgetary restraints, we had to do some rewriting while we were filming, and a lot of it did come down to exactly what you just said. How can we have our main character, Marshall Brooker, make an active decision that propels the story, or the villain make a decision that forces his hand. What we found interesting with this is, and this isn't giving away too much, but Brooker, there is no movie unless he does what he does, and what he does is he doesn't turn over the relic that he finds. He essentially holds it hostage. He decides that he's going to sell it to the highest bidder versus the individual that hired him for the job. And by doing that, he kind of brings havoc upon his own life and his family, and he has to deal with those consequences.
Interesting, Mr. Brad. Interesting indeed. And how do you ensure as every single scene in your script is pulling double or triple duty, advancing the plot, revealing a character, and building the theme?
That's a yeah. It in a way, I don't know if there's any. So much of this is subjective, right? You put all this together, you get the performance. I think that's what's really interesting too. As a writer, you write lines, and in a novel or short story, you can inject what people are feeling and what they're thinking, and maybe they're pulling from some previous experience, and you can detail that in your description. In a film and a screenplay, you write it and you can add it to the screenplay, I suppose, but at the end of the day, it's the actor that is going to basically inject that into the moment, into what is being filmed. And so much of it, the writer and the actors are really in this dance together, and obviously the director is kind of dictating which parts of those will be featured. Maybe there are things that end up on the cutting room floor, so to speak. But that's what I find is interesting about screenwriting is, you can have a lot of best laid plans in your writing, but at the end of the day, it's not the story's not over when you're done writing. It's really just the beginning.
How do you use subtext? What is it being said to create tension and depth of your dialogue scenes, Mr. Brandon?
Hmm. Yeah, and maybe that's a strength of film, being able to work in subtext, because there's a lot of things that can be shown instead of stated. Whereas in a novel, you have to describe what things are and what they look like and what's in the room and what people are thinking. Or I mean, you can. I guess you don't have to. Uh, in a film, there is this kind of expectation that you will show the audience things and that they don't need to be told. So I think subtext is really, so important in a scene. And uh, there are some things that you can do visually, just in like what is placed and in the composition of the shot. But I think the important subtext is what the actors bring, what they can do. I mean, for example, sometimes we would have actors that would say, I don't know that I need to say this line. I think I can do it with a look. Or maybe if I just stand up instead of saying this line, that accomplishes the same narrative goal. And we would try those things, and in that experimentation we would find that either they were right, or maybe we needed to adjust a little bit the written words. But a lot of times the actors instincts were correct, that they could circumvent certain lines because they could do it with physical acting.
The writing process and craft, Mr. Brandon. How do you pressure test your concept to ensure it has enough weight, conflict, and originally to sustain 90 to 120 pages?
Sure. Well, the best test is to let people into the process and let them give you feedback. If you have something, if you're a writer, I suppose there's a small group of people that you probably let into the process with you and let them look at rough drafts and whatnot. But I can tell you that as soon as you open up your story to scrutiny by a larger crew, people are going to find the cracks. People are going to find the things that are not working, and you have to figure out if you have a defense for your decisions. And with this, certainly things changed. Let's just say it that way, from where it started. And a screenplay, I feel like is, some people will dispute this idea, but I do see it as a blueprint. I don't think that it is the text. The film that'll be created is the text. The To me, the screenplay is just, like I said earlier, this is the way that it begins.
Mr. Brandon, as a screenwriter and film producer, what are your short term and long term goals?
Short term, our film is finished. It is beginning its film festival rounds. We will know more about which festivals that has been accepted to by the beginning of next year. So that's very exciting. And at that point, we will see about distribution, if it will be just rental, if there'll be theatrical. There's always self distribution that's an option depending on what the film festival route provides us. Long term goals is really just to make another movie. It's something I said early on with this is that this is a movie for an audience of one. We need to find one person that believes in this project and they can help us make the next one. So if you're that one person, please reach out.
Yes, please reach out to Mr. Brandon and thank you for that goals and looking forward for more success and good luck.
Thank
And
you.
what will be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
I think the biggest thing is to just start. The more that you delay, the less time you're going to have. We all are here on the mortal coil for finite amount of time, and I don't want to be you know too doom and gloom about it, but I think that that's what I learned is that I really enjoyed this process. I want to do it again, and that's kind of my takeaway is like I want to do this as many times as possible, create something and be the author of it. So if you have those desires and you have those dreams, don't wait. I mean, I'm not saying this, I'm not the first person to say this, but it's very true. Just don't wait. Just get into it today.
Well, thank you for that advice, Mr. Brandon. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Sure. I have one right here. It's Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger. This is a book series that I've always loved, and it's a real mixture of fantasy, western, horror, sci-fi. I've always liked genre storytelling. I think it reveals a lot about our current day life that maybe is hard to say, and in the genre setting, you can maybe be a little more honest than you would otherwise, depending on who you are as an author. But for me, I found these books just endlessly satisfying, and I read them at a really important time in my life when I was, starting a new adventure. I was, leaving something comfortable, and I was beginning a whole new journey. And so I kind of took the journey along with the protagonist, Roland. And I think about them often, and they really influence my work.
How does the story you sell in a pitch meeting sometimes differ from the story you tell on the page? And how do you manage that transition? And thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Brandon.
Of course. Yeah, when it comes to the pitch versus the shooting script, let's say, I think the main thing is when you're pitching, you're hopefully pitching to people that you're trying to sell them on you and the vision of the movie. You're not trying to sell them a movie that's already made, right? So I think you want to be honest about that, and you don't want to sell somebody. You don't want to include something in a pitch that you know is not going to make it through to completion. So you want them to buy into the idea of what you really want to do, and be honest that hey, things may change. We may need to make adjustments, but if you're preserving the themes and the central core of the idea, you're not going to upset them because they're hopefully you're making changes because it's going to make the film better.
Yes, definitely. And what is your framework for processing contradictory script notes without losing your vision or becoming defensive?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is to look at who's giving you the notes, right? Is it someone that you respect? Is it somebody that you need to listen to, right? If someone that you don't respect and you don't need to listen to them, like I don't have social media, for example. And, I can imagine that there's a lot of people that get feedback from, strangers and just people out in, on the internet. And it's like, you don't have to listen to those people. That's a fallacy, right? That you need to listen to everybody that gives you feedback. So that's step one. Once you know who's giving you feedback, and if it's someone you do respect and it's good, then you have to look at it, soberly, and just not be too precious about the thing you're trying to make. if you want to be in complete control, then you can be an author of a novel or whatever. But even those people have editors, right? Like at the end of the day, you don't want to be a Dr. Frankenstein. You want to make something that can stand the test of time. That and lastly, I would just say, like, there's a humility that's good in understanding that you might not be perfect, right? That your
Mhm.
work can be scrutinized, and if it's someone you respect, then I think you should definitely listen. But at the end of the day, you can not listen to somebody that you respect. You can say, like, I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to make a different call. But you've got to be open to those suggestions.
What is your best strategy for overcoming attachment to brilliantly written scene, character, or line of a dialogue that in your gut needs to be cut for a good for the whole film?
Sure. In our film, there was a scene where the main character performs musically at a bar, and knowing the actor, I knew that this would be a great scene, and he was going to do a great performance, and I was really excited about it. And that was the first thing that everybody wanted to cut. And kind of to your question, I was like, why? Why? This is going to be great. And multiple people just said this doesn't line up with his character. And it did take me a few minutes of kind of looking at the film from a little bit further back, like taking a step back and looking at the whole thing, and taking away the knowledge that I had of the performer, right, and trying to think about the character versus the actor. And once I did that, I realized they were right, that there were a lot of narrative reasons that having this character perform in a public way contradicted who he was as a character. But I had become blinded to that because I knew that it would, as an individual scene, that it would be good, it would be done well, but it didn't fit into the context of the whole piece.
Mr. Braddon, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season. I'm a book 101 review in fifth season too, a comedy 101 second season. I'm a food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season. I'm a baby podcast, law 101, and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 and fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its
Wow.
first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Brandon, if you could give one piece of recommendation to an aspiring future writer, something that goes against the common wisdom, what would it be?
I think the common wisdom is you should watch as many movies as you can, and that's great. But I think the main thing you need to do is go live your life, experience things, so you have something to write about.
Yes, definitely read and read and read. And would you be my guest on Movie 101 review? And let's talk about your favorite movies.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Mr. Brandon Ransbottom, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming film, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, if you'd love to see more about the movie, go to brookermovie.com, and we'd glad to have you on the journey.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Brandon Ransbottom, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering films to come, more and more empowering, for sure, advocacy to come. So, Mr. Brandon, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.